Okay, for the next video in solving equations, we'll be going a little bit more complicated. This time we'll be using grade 10 math that you should have mastered. So it's a bit harder. And you'll notice in both cases we have two answers. They're both parabolas. And we have a polynomial that has three terms and has a power of 2. There's 2x squared. Here we have minus 2x. And the last term does not have an x. That's important because we can't use simple factoring for those. And in the first case, you'll notice you have two positive answers. Two, I should say, whole answers. It's not positive. Minus 4 is negative, but it's a whole number. In the second case, we'll have a fraction that's negative 1/3 and the 2. So that one uses a slightly different method, a bit longer. So in the first one, you might have noticed that everything is even. There's a 2, another 2, and finally a 24 in the third term. So if you find anything like that, you'll want to factor that out to make your numbers in your polynomial as small as possible. Especially if you're not using a calculator, it makes it a bit easier. So divide everything by 2. So we end up with a trinomial that starts with a single x squared minus a single x, then minus 12. And that again equals 0. Like we saw in the first video, the answers are on the x-axis. That's why we have the whole equation of the value of y equals 0 on this horizontal line here. So next we have to go back to how do you get this expanded x squared minus x minus 12. Well, if we want to factor that, if we look at something that already is factored, it means we have two brackets multiplied by each other. Usually you'd expand that with FOIL. So you do x multiplied by x, and x times b, a times x, and a times b. So if you put this together, you'll notice that you end up with 4 terms. You have 2 terms that are with x. You can actually add those because they have the same variable. And then you have a product term, which are made by 2 numbers. Now, in your expanded form, you get the answer of the product and you get the answer of the sum. So when we go back to our problem, what we're looking at is the answer of a product and a sum. So minus 12 is the answer of a product, and minus 1 is the answer of a sum of the same 2 numbers. So one thing you can do is write it out here. I'm looking for something that its product is negative 12 and its sum is negative 1. So what are the different ways of doing negative 12 you multiply? Well, you can do 1 multiplied by negative 12. You can do negative 1 times 12. You can do 2 multiplied by negative 6. You can do minus 2 times positive 6. You can do 3 times negative 4. And finally, you can do minus 3 multiplied by positive 4. So there's only one combination of all of those that will also have a sum of negative 1. So if you find this a bit hard to do in your head, if you didn't quite master that in grade 10, you're better off just writing them out. Make out your big list of all the products you can think of. And then you start adding them on the paper, and you'll notice that the only time that you get a minus 1 when you add them up is when you take the 3 minus 4, which means when you multiply those, it also gives you minus 12. So start by finding the products and add them together, see which one gives the sum you're looking for. So these are the easiest form to make, because once you've found your product and your sum numbers, you just write out your answer. So like we do reverse FOIL, we have 2 terms. These are terms that contain an x only. And you simply take the first number, which is 3, you put plus 3. The second one, minus 4, goes in the second factor. So 2 times x plus 3 is the first factor, times x minus 4, which is the second factor. So we haven't solved yet. To solve, we have to use the 0 theory. That means if an expression is multiplied by 0, the whole expression becomes 0. Now 2 can never be 0, so we can't use that to solve. But x plus 3 could become 0. X plus 3 could equal 0 So what we do is we solve for x. So what I did is subtract 3 from each side. There's only one x. 3 minus 3 equals 0. Nothing else on the left. Right hand side, 0 minus 3. We are left with the first solution. So the second factor, x minus 4 equals 0. Again, using the 0 theorem, we do plus 4 on each side. We are left with x equals 4. Now, if you're in grade 10, you probably have to put what I put in red, which is like the work, how you actually get to the solution. Usually by grade 11, your teacher will probably not require you to write that much detail. You could go straight from the factored form, which is here, 2 bracket x plus 3 bracket x minus 4 equals 0, and skip right to x equals minus 3, x equals 4. Make sure you check with your teacher, see how much detail they want. Okay, next thing. This one, we look here, and 3 is not common, so we can't factor 3 out. That's unfortunate. So that means we're left with a number in front of the x squared. Now, the method will be similar but different in this case. So what we will do when we find a product, and I'll write out something different. I'll write out the different coefficients. So here we have the a coefficient is 3, the b coefficient is minus 5, and the c coefficient is minus 2. Now the product will always be a multiplied by c, and the sum will always be the b coefficient. On the first problem, a was 1, so that's why I didn't really have any effect, because 1 multiplied by something is the same thing. So here, we have to do 3 multiplied with minus 2, which gives us minus 6. That's our product. The sum is simply b. It's minus 5. So here, I have to think of two numbers that when I multiply them, gives me minus 6. So that can be either 1 times minus 6, minus 1 times 6, 2 multiplied by minus 3, or minus 2 multiplied by 3. And I want their sum to be minus 5. So here, the only thing that will work is minus 6 multiplied by 1. So minus 6 multiplied by 1 and negative 6 plus 1, they work. Okay, so here I have to be careful. I can't skip right to the factors. What I have to do is rewrite my polynomial so it now becomes something with 4 terms. So I put the 3x squared, and in the middle here, I'll have to use these to find which terms of x, because we know that minus 6 plus 1 equals minus 5. So if I were to write minus 6x plus, here I'll write the 1 even though I don't need to, 1x, then I add the minus 2. So these two in the middle come from the product sum work I did. And you'll notice that I haven't changed the value of my expression. It's still 3x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. The only difference is I expanded it so it would be minus 6 and plus 1, which has the same value as minus x. So what we do, we will group this. We will split this in half. You can do that when it's an even number. You have 4, so 2 on one side, 2 on the other. And we'll just factor each side, which is a common factor. So here, 3 goes in 3 and minus 6, and x is common to both. So I will take 3x as a factor. And what's left? Okay, 3 goes into 3 once. X squared divided by x is left with x. Minus 6 divided by 3 is minus 2. X goes into x one time. And then on the right-hand side, you can't do much except take out 1. So 1, we're left with x, we're left with minus 2, and it's still everything equals 0. And notice something interesting. We have 2 brackets, or 2 factors that are identical. That's really important. So what we're going to do, we're going to factor the factor. That's strange to say, but x minus 2 is now the factor. and it's common to both terms. So x minus 2. So the first term, if I remove x minus 2, you're left with 3x. Don't forget I remove by dividing. So it simplifies to 1, I'm left with 3x. And in the second one, I'm left with plus 1 equals 0. So now that I'm completely factored, I can solve this. So we'll use a zero theorem, x minus 2 equals 0, or 3x plus 1 equals 0. Here, if I do plus 2 on each side of the equal, I'm left with x equals 2. That's my first solution. And in the second case, I'll have two steps. So 3x plus nothing, 1 minus 1 equals 0. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. I want to get rid of the 3. The 3's simplify to 1. I'm left with x equals negative 1/3. So I don't like to put negative 1/3 in decimal because it's negative 0.3 forever. Okay, it's just a periodic decimal. So I'll leave it as a fraction. So as we can see on our graph, we had the solutions plus 2, minus 1/3, and the algebra gives us the same answer again. So I'll make this a bit smaller so we can see all the steps. Okay, so first thing we notice, we can't get rid of the coefficient that's in front of the x squared. It stays a equals 3. So because it's not 1, the product will be coefficient a times coefficient c. So once we do that, we have a minus 6, and the sum that we use to factor is just that still the b value is negative 5. So we find the only pair of numbers that work that will do this. And then we rewrite the equation. You don't go to the factors right away. And then that red line in the middle means that we're creating two groups. We have a group on the left, and we have a group on the right. Now we factor these separately. So the group on the left, 3x, is the common factor. The group on the right doesn't have anything, so we do have to write that 1 just to make it easier to follow through. And then we notice that x minus 2 is common to both terms. So we take out x minus 2 as a common factor, and what's left when we divide it out, 3x as the first term of the second factor, and plus 1 as the second term here in the second factor. So now we have two factors. We make both or either or equals to 0. We solve the first one, we solve the second one, and we get both answers. So this would be something that would be mastering grade 10 because you get a lot of those to do. It's not as easy, but still, if you learn the steps, you can get to the answer.